Hi, and welcome to this lesson on process innovation, targeting bottlenecks with Poogie. So process innovation, it's all about the system. Just like what we talked about in the first two lessons of this course, we're going to come back to the theory of constraints and focus on the fact that all systems, especially when it comes to a process, are limited by a bottleneck, and that focusing improvements around that bottleneck is the only way to derive value. This helps us to focus and to know where to put our attention when it comes to improving any process and innovating on it. We have to use what's called the 5 focusing steps, which is our process of ongoing improvement, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But we also need to use the thinking processes and throughput accounting. We've already covered throughput accounting, so you've got 1 out of 3 so far. So first, the process of ongoing improvement is a 5-step process about how to exploit the constraints or the bottlenecks in your system. It starts first by identifying the constraint. This can oftentimes be very difficult and require some measurement, but also you can usually figure it out by talking to people. Next, we need to exploit the constraint. Exploiting the constraint is really important because oftentimes whatever bottleneck or constraint there is in your system, there is almost never full utilization of that part of the process. That process is usually a bottleneck because of the fact that it's not efficient or it's underutilized. Next, once you fully utilize the constraint, you then need to subordinate all other processes. That's because of the fact that anything that's not the bottleneck should not be running at full efficiency. Only the bottleneck should be running at full efficiency. Otherwise, you're going to create a lot of work in process, which is going to require you to have storage and waste and tracking that you don't need. Then, once you've subordinated everything in the system and the movement of materials or ideas or work is continuing at a steady pace between each one of the processes, you then want to elevate the constraint. Elevating the constraint means that we add more capacity to it and we make the whole system go faster as a result. Finally, we then need to repeat this process and we need to make sure that we also elevate the subordinated processes, because as we go faster at our bottleneck, the other processes need to go faster too. This is going to allow us to get the most out of our system, and eventually the bottleneck's going to move. This allows you to get the most from your resources, then reduce waste, and then finally increase throughput. So many times what we're going to find though is that when we want to go make a change, we're going to see what appears to be a conflict, such as we need to go faster, but we can't go faster, or we need to change the way that we work, but we're limited and have to work this way because of regulations. Whatever those cases are, what you have is I want to do A and I want to do A prime or the opposite of A in order to achieve the goal. This conflict is further elaborated in a technique that we call the Vanishing Cloud. Here we say that we have a desired action D and its opposite D prime. And the reason why we want to do them is because of the fact that we have an assumption that if we do D, then we're going to be able to get B, which is a requisite to getting A. So we start with our objective, A. We know that the objective A has 2 inputs, B and C. But in order to get B and C, we have to do an action and its opposite. How do we solve this problem? Well, we attack the assumptions, because in almost all cases, in a natural system, there is no conflict. There are just bad assumptions. And I'll give you an example. Hi, I hope you're enjoying this free lesson from the University of Maryland's Project Management Center for Excellence. If you want to check out more lessons just like this one, click the link in the description below where you'll be able to go to our website on executive project management. There, you can find edX courses, professional short courses where you can learn from an instructor like me, as well as request custom team training for you and your organization. All right, let's get back to the lesson and I'll see you at the end. So here's an example of the Vanishing Cloud in action. We know that on our projects, the goal is to be profitable and to have a high return on investment. And in order to do that, we need to reduce costs and we need to increase revenues. Now, there is the old world belief that going slower reduces costs for the organization because of the fact that we can extend out our resources and maximize their utilization. Therefore, in one belief, we should go slower. But we also know that the only time that we get revenues is when we deliver the project. So at the bottom here, we know that in order to increase revenues, we need to go faster. because if we go faster, we're going to get more revenues. Having the project going slower and the project going faster, they're opposites, so they can't both happen at the same time. How do we solve this problem? How do we reduce costs and how do we increase revenues? Well, the problem is in the assumptions that are highlighted in red. Going slower reduces cost is an incorrect assumption. We know this because of the fact that there is a cost of delay, and the cost of delay is the lost revenues by not delivering earlier. And in fact, that cost of delay also includes the potential uncertainty around timing impacts and market impacts, whether or not your project is still relevant and whether or not your project is still the best option for the customer. So with all that in the cost of delay, we know that going faster is going to actually reduce costs because the cost of delay is greater than the cost of the project. That's how we solve this vanishing cloud. But what about when you can't solve the conflict? What about when you don't have an aligned objective? The key to the vanishing cloud is one objective with two prerequisites that both have a different action that you want to take. But oftentimes when we work in organizations, we don't always have the same objective. Some people want to achieve different things either for themselves or for their part of the organization. Here's where we have to come to conflict resolution. So this is a little bit of a preview of the Agile Leadership course, but what we're showing here is that there are 5 different styles of conflict modes, and it all depends on your assertiveness and your cooperativeness. If you're going to be highly assertive and very cooperative, you're going to go for a win-win, a collaborative solution. That oftentimes involves having the same objective, aligning objectives, and then being able to solve for the problem. But otherwise, you either need to compromise, you need to accommodate, you need to compete to win, or you need to just avoid the problem. All of these are valid ways of resolving conflict when you can't get to a win-win because you don't have the time, the resources, or the interest. So in summary, there are 4 parts to process innovation. First, we need to model and understand the buyer's organization. This means we need to be able to define their processes, we have to understand what their throughput and their cost functions are, and we need to be able to validate that we have the right objective from the beginning. Then we need to focus in with our 5 focusing steps in the process of ongoing improvement. We need to identify the constraint, exploit it, get its maximum utilization. We then need to subordinate all other processes, then elevate that constraint and continue the process so that the bottleneck, if it moves, we can retarget appropriately. Third, we need to align our competing objectives. As we go through this process, there will be conflict, but if everyone has the same objective, and they should in an organization, then we will be able to solve that problem by attacking our underlying assumptions, going for that win-win. However, when the win-win doesn't happen, we know that we can rely on conflict resolution, which we'll talk about in the next course. And finally, prioritize your objectives. At every step, you need to start with the most impactful thing that you need to do next. Be it identifying the constraint, elevating it, always prioritize your objectives and solve them one at a time. This will unleash new understanding and new innovation that will allow you to increase your process success and drive value into the buyer's organization. I hope this has been useful for you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next week. Hey there, did you enjoy that lesson as much as I did? If you did, go ahead and give us a like. If you want to see another one, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, put them below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Moreover, is there somebody in your life who really needs this lesson right now? If so, go ahead and share it with them. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. Now, we look forward to seeing you in the next lesson where you can learn even more from the University of Maryland Project Management Center for Excellence. Thanks so much.